All right, you ready, Kenny? I'd like to call to order the Thursday, February 4th, 2016 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Roll call, please.
Stein?
Here.
Stonebarger?
Here.
McGuire?
Here.
Shriver?
Here.
Dolly? Here. Hanson? Here. Arnold? Here. Albertson? Here. And Mr. Bill Johnson is absent. We have a quorum.
Thanks. I'd like to make a note that in the Board of Adjustment, the number of votes you need for a passing vote is 5. 5 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, Dan. You don't get to vote again. Get your popcorn. First item on the agenda is the approval of the January 7th, 2016 minutes. I need a motion and a second.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is applicant Teresa Ingles, permit number 16522, seeks a variance relief from the requirements of the zoning ordinance, appealing the terms in regard to a non-conforming structure in the R1 zone at 1300 North Maple. Ken?
Right. As stated, this is application for building permit number 16522. Application was submitted requesting to alter an existing non-conforming 936 square foot 26 by 36 unattached garage. Said structure proposed to be repositioned or a portion removed so as to be located not closer than 3 feet from the rear east property line where 9 feet is required. In 1995, Doug and Teresa Ingles were issued a building permit 6841 for a compliant 864 square foot 24 by 36 unattached garage to be constructed 10 feet from the north and 10 feet from the south property lines. However, the building was repositioned and encroaching 3.5 feet over the east rear property line into the public right-of-way. Due to financing purposes, Teresa Ingles comes now to the board requesting to alter the structure, remove a portion of or reposition to satisfy the financer. Currently, the compliant R1 zone parcel consists of a single-family dwelling which is attached 308 square foot single garage, a non-conforming unattached triple garage, and a utility shed. There's a total of 7,392 square feet of legal buildable area on this parcel available for accessory structures, of which 2,146 square feet, 29% is occupied by a primary structure house with attached garage. Basically what it's getting down to is, as you can see on the file here, back in the day, for whatever reason, the garage got built and it actually hangs 3.5 feet into the alleyway. A little bit of the confusing thing is this alley. Huh?
Can you use the mouse so we can see it on the camera, please?
Oh, okay. I hate that ugly thing. And as you can see here, the alley actually splits. It is 6 foot wider on the top part than it is the south part. That might have been reason for part of the mix-up, but that portion is neither here nor there, what we're trying to satisfy today. So we've requested that the garage be moved to a minimum of not less than 3 feet from the property line, and whether they push the garage over or they cut it off, we don't care how they do it. The 3 feet is just to verify, because that's a footprint elevation to make sure with the minimum amount necessary to make it onto their property, but that'll legally make sure that the overhang and all parts of the garage is on their property.
All right, so for layman's terms, the original permit, the garage was going to lay one direction, one reason or another. It got moved in other direction. Somebody eyeballed the alley from the north, not realizing it was a 20-foot instead of a 12-foot alley, and here we sit.
Correct.
And the applicant's willing to move it over to the point that it's 3 feet from the property line?
The footprint is 3 feet from the property line, yep.
Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit.
We did not have anybody contact us personally, but there might be somebody in the audience. And yeah, Teresa, you want to talk? You can talk.
Well, basically, I just would like to know why I cannot get an easement or a variance so that nothing has to be done.
So the question to you, Stanton, would be, I think we can give you a variance. That's what we're here to do. We can only variance you to the lot line. We don't have the authority to variance into the public right away. Stan, the question to you would be, I think what you're asking for is, would we vacate the piece of ground underneath the building? And when I checked earlier, it was something that we don't have the ability to vacate a specific footprint under that building.
And why, I don't understand why that is exactly.
Well, and yeah, Mark, I see Mark Meyer in the back. I don't know what kind of utility easements are in that alley, but typically those alleys are there because utilities has set up their infrastructure in the alleys, and that's why they exist. I think there'd be resistance from the utilities to allow any permanent structures to be placed upon an existing platted easement for utilities. That's probably why. Mark, do you know, are there utilities in that alley?
But
The,
it's-
the other question I have, Stanton, is once a vacation is done of your portion of that land, we can't undo a vacation. You can't unring the bell. So if the thing burned down, they could be able to put it right back where it was forever.
Sure, unless you reacquired that property through eminent domain, you'd be gone forever.
So what would happen, the biggest part of the reason is if we vacate it just under that building and then it burned down, see what would happen is if we variance it to the lot line or to the 3 feet like you're asking for, and then it burns down 10 years from now, when you come back in for your building permit, they're gonna ask you to build it in accordance with our ordinance, which might be a little further over, but that's after substantial damage. If we vacate that property and change the ownership of that property from the city to you, we can never unring that bell. If it burns down, you could stat it right back where it was. It's where they don't want it, so.
Say, Stanton, on that garage, if you gave them a variance, couldn't they have some kind of an attachment to that variance if something did happen to that when that was filed?
Not a variance. We give
I'm
the
sorry,
variance.
but-
It's a vacation.
Or a vacation, couldn't that be something written into that vacation, that if something would happen to that, they would have to move it back?
Well, I can tell you that it's happened
Or give it
in,
back.
sorry,
Sorry about
Jason. It's happened in limited circumstances around the city. I can give you an example, and I think maybe it predates Shane, our city engineer, but over near Sixth Street Circle Association, you've probably seen that monument sign just on the north side of Fourth, across from Watertown Iron and Metal. There's a monument sign that lets people know this is the Sixth Street Circle homeowners area, and that sign is clearly located in the public right-of-way. They were given an encroachment, the ability to encroach in the public right-of-way because it's larger than everyone agrees it needs to be, but rather than vacate the right-of-way, the city said, we're gonna hang on to the right-of-way, but we'll allow an encroachment permit for it to be there. The same is true south on Broadway. It's that the realty place and the law firm on the east side of Broadway, just before you get to 212, there's the Roby firm, and then there's a property, a real estate business there. That sign, if you look at the aerial photo, you're gonna see that sign is clearly located in the public right-of-way, and the city entered into an agreement that said, if we ever decide that sign has to go, you're moving it. And they agreed to that, but we're not gonna make you move it today. So there have been limited circumstances where the city's allowed encroachments to exist in the public right-of-way, but it's only because it wasn't interfering with anything. I don't know the status of this alley, and that's why Mark's come up to the podium to answer that question.
Well, the problem with that alley is if you go right across the street or right across the alley there's a lot of things that are gonna have to be moved as they're being sold because there's other ones that are sitting way too close to the alley up there.
Yeah, they're too close, but they're not in the alley. That's the difference. This is in the alley, those are not. There is no other building structure located in the alley.
Is the one to the east there?
This one?
Yeah.
No, it's not in the alley. The overhead hang comes right up to it, but it's not in the alley.
I thought it was in the alley when you looked at it.
What year again was the garage built? And since that time, the alley has never been widened or more property taken?
June of '95.
Okay, and since that time, the alley's not changed?
Nope.
So it was clearly built in the right-of-way from day one?
Correct. Contradictory from the permit that was issued that shows it would be 10 foot away from the alley.
Supposed to be built 10 feet away?
Yeah, the building
By
permit
the,
that
by
was
the
pulled for
building
this.
permit that was issued?
Yeah, it's in our file, or I can.
The original one had the cars entering from the alley and had it away. It's, for some point in time during the construction of it, they chose to move it, turn the doors from facing the alley to north-south. And in doing so, my assumption is somebody eyeballed the concrete thinking it was a 12-foot alley and they were 4 feet off, or a 20-foot alley and they were, or 12-foot alley and they were 4 feet off, to find out it was a the other way around. They thought it was 12 foot, it was actually 20, so they ended up being 3 feet in instead of right on the lot line. When they did the cement, somebody said it's a 12-foot alley. We're going to line you up right with these guys, but it was a 20-foot alley. Because on the south side of the block, it's a 12-foot alley. On the north end, it's
But
20.
It still would not have been 10 feet off, though.
No,
This,
no,
yeah,
no.
this is the permit that was issued.
Yeah.
And see, at some point, they decided instead of building it like that, they turned it sideways and put it right on the lot line where they thought the lot line was. In fact, they ended up putting it 3.5 feet outside the lot line. They thought they were 6 inches in, they were 3.5 out.
Who owned the house when the garage was built?
Doug did.
Doug?
Yeah, originally the doors were gonna face the alley. And in conversations with Darwin, we got the agreement to turn it the way it's turned now. But, you know, back in '95, you know, things were a lot different. If you wanted to make a change, you called up Darwin and said, this is what I wanna do, you know, talk about it. You give you a yay or nay, and, I mean, that's what you go ahead with. I mean, it's the same reason that the garage across the alley is built right on the, ends up right on the line. I mean, it's been that way since 1995. It's never been an issue. The only thing that ever has been an issue in that alley is further south, there's the telephone utilities that every time a snowplow goes through there, they run over them. But as far as anything ever close to the garage, it's never been an issue.
And it's still not, you know, I've worked on this with the city. It's still not an issue with the city. The city understands it's there, it's there, it's there, it's fine.
Right, but to take a
Problem is-
perfectly good property and
Well, I don't want to argue with you, but here's the deal is the mortgagee, the person who's buying it, the mortgagee wants clear right of property under all of those buildings. The city says in order to do that, we need more than a variance. We need a vacation of the property under that. And there's utilities under there, and if we give a vacation, we've now given them that property into perpetuity. You can't unring that bell, and if it burns down, there's an agreement that they're going to give it back to us. That agreement can't be drawn up. It doesn't exist. So the city doesn't, I thought, well, we give them a variance, and the city council, I even went as far as said, if the building official says, we know it's in the public right of way, we're okay with it. If it burns down, you got to move it. The lien holder wasn't okay with that.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot we can do.
Doug, based on what you just said, and I understand years ago things were a lot different in those earlier years, but you felt when you talked to Brian, or Darwin, that he would let you move it over to the property
oh
line.
yeah, we had the
But did-
okay to turn it to the south.
But
and-
did he say you could go 3.5 feet into the
Well,
public right away?
I mean, I'd have to get my
Yeah.
people up here that did the concrete. I mean, it was kind of out of my hands after that point, you know?
I think it's an honest mistake that, hey, we're going to move the building. I think somebody just mismeasured where the building needed to be. I think they thought it was a 12-foot alley all the way through. It's really a 20-foot alley. So thinking you were 6 inches inside your property line, you actually, in all actuality, you were 3.5 feet outside it. So here we sit going, what can we do to help them? You know, we can give them a variance to get as close as we can. That's what this board can do. If they want to go through a vacation process with the city to vacate the land under it, from my understanding, that's not a viable option. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stan. And
I guess this board could make a recommendation to the city council, but like you said, I think it's probably unlikely the council would approve the vacation, but you folks can make whatever recommendation you'd like to the city council on this.
That would be the right process to go through, though, you know.
And we can give a variance to get to the property line. That's all this board can do. We can say, you know, based on the circumstances, you know, the city council can vacate that property underneath it if they want, but there's going to be more to that as far as the precedents you set. But
Pat?
we can sure do it that way.
Pat, before it goes to the city council, it would come back to this board acting as the planning commission. A vacation, if that's the route that was chosen, a vacation comes back to the planning commission with proper notice of a hearing, and then you reinstigate that through this board first.
So what's in front of us today is a 3-foot variance from the property line, and we can act on that if you want to pursue the vacation. And like we said, that it sets a precedence, and the reason the city's generally unlikely to give a vacation is they now gave you that property. And we can't ever get it back without negotiating with you at a later date. And then everybody up and down there's gonna wanna vacate that same amount of property north and south of you, but.
I'm just trying to do what's easiest.
I know, I see it, and I know our board,
Cost-effective.
our board very easily can grant the variance that you're asking for and at least take that step in the right direction.
So specifically, the wording would be to pass a variance that would allow them up to 3 feet or up to the property line.
3 feet from the property line.
Yeah. However, they choose to get the building to accommodate that, that would be a 3-foot
Their
variance.
choice. I mean, that's a step, then a full-blown vacation is another
Right.
process, and it's a much trickier process because of the precedents it sets and the utilities that are under there. We had an issue over on Highway 20 where somebody built a building years back on an easement, and he was required to move that building also because of the utilities that were under it.
I mean,
Pat, Mark never did get a chance to talk on that. Maybe he does have something.
I'd be
to add to
interested in what
that.
you guys have to say, Mark.
Mark Meyer, Watertown Utilities. There is utilities in that alley. Now, as far as our gas or electric, none of them are underneath that garage. They're to the east of the garage. But I know communication and everything is in that alley. It's just, I don't know if anything is underneath it or not. I know ours isn't.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else to speak on, in the open before I close it? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second. What we can do is we can give them what they ask for, is the 3 feet. And we could have them, I guess we can have them go through Stanton to see what the precedence is for a vacation and if there's an appetite for the vacation of the ground. But in the short run, we can at least give them a vacation or a variance to get for what they're asking for.
So a 3-foot variance without a recommendation to the city to do the vacation.
We can give them a 3-foot variance and with a recommendation that they work with city staff to see if a vacation is something that we have the appetite for, the city has the appetite for. It's a little different. Vacations are much different than not much different than a variance.
I would make a motion to approve 16522 as written. And
Second.
Are you saying something else, John?
if we so desire to do any recommendations to the city council, I would like to be that in separate type of a motion.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Dolly. Any other further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So the variance is there. Now, if you want to pursue the city, it's a much trickier battle. We could postpone the whole thing and you can withdraw it, but then you're gonna,
now the variance we're talking about is taking it to the property line, like the garage right across the alley, or it's 3 feet on the other side of it?
It's 3 foot away from it. The footprint is 3 foot away, so the overhanging eave, if it's a foot over or whatever, will be there. More than likely. it's
Sidewall.
back a foot or two too, because his eave is what's on the edge of the property line, if the yellow line's even correct.
Okay.
it's sidewall 3.5 feet when you say footprint. That's what you're talking about?
Right.
Yeah, so the
That's a
sidewall is
concrete-
3.5 feet. Your overhang may only be 1.5 feet, but it's that far now. So, I mean, a person can then say, I have the variance to do this. If you want to visit with Stanton in regard to, could you get a full-blown vacation of that property, you can pursue that. But at least now you have the variance that if you look and go, that vacation idea isn't going to work, at least you don't have to come back before us to get that variance.
But as far as a vacation or an encroachment, you can't, I mean, you're talking the whole half of the alley. You can't just talk the distance that it's out.
And we can, I'll have you visit with Stanton on that and the engineering staff there. Starts with them.
What about, and how long do we have to do that before they give us?
Variances and vacations are miles apart as far as, because of the legal precedents that's set with the vacations. But Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Lost my agenda. Item number 3, applicant Michael and Jana Mills, permit number 16523. The variance seeks relief from the requirements of the zoning ordinance in regard to a non-conforming addition to a compliant garage located in R1 Single Family District at 444 12th Avenue Northwest.
Thank you. Again, this is application for 16523. Application was submitted requesting to construct a 1,521 square foot addition, 621 square feet of which is non-conforming onto an existing compliant 525.6 square foot attached garage. Said addition proposed to be constructed 13.5 feet from the front west property line where a minimum is 25 feet is required. This compliant R1 zoned parcel consists of a conforming single-family dwelling with attached 525.6 double garage. The parcel lacks standard boulevard infrastructure requirements, boulevard tree sidewalk. If application is endorsed, the board may consider fulfillment of all or any of those requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by the building permit. So they want me to use this. I want to bring it.
So, Ken,
Yep.
they're building out towards Crestview Drive, so it's only gonna be, what, 9 feet?
Right, they want to come from this corner out 16 feet, out 13.5 feet.
Ken, the first thing we always
No,
ask on,
11.5.
first thing we always ask on that is how big is that right of way? How big from property line to property line crossing that street? I see there's quite a bit of boulevard on that side of the house with no
It's
sidewalk.
60 foot on this side and it's 50 foot on this side.
Okay, so Crestview has a 60-foot right of way
Correct.
and
And they
50
wanna
foot
go
on 12.
This way and come down this way, and they're actually going to extend out the back and come into this way, so.
So is that all gonna be garage, or is this garage and part of housing, or?
No, so the idea would be to put.
Hold on 1 second, I need to open the public hearing. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We got to state your names for the record.
Mike Mills, homeowner. What we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do, is put a little garage or shop on the back. But the problem is where the concrete pad back there is where there's a window in the kitchen. And so if I put a garage there, how it is, we're fine going to the south, we have enough room. But the problem is I'd be a really short place to work on a car, things like that. And so by going further out and putting the third stall on the actual front of the house, that would give us enough depth to have a shop in the back. I currently am a shop teacher, and so do a lot of hands-on stuff, and got a car project I'd like to work on with my boys. And so that's kind of where we're at. My wife thinks she needs to park in the garage in the winter, so I need to put something else on the back. But yes, it'd be all garage,
Workshop and garage.
workshop.
So I drove by to see you've got a fifth wheel. You can legally park that fifth wheel in that space right now because it's a corner lot, and he can designate that as his side yard for parking his fifth wheel.
His fifth wheel is currently legally parked, yep, according to our ordinance.
And this is
Well-
one of those double front yards where
Double front yard.
it's
He's got
used
the
as a
garage on
side
that
yard, but
side,
it's
so he could
legally
put
front.
a pad there, and he could put a fifth wheel on that side of the garage and be perfectly legal. But then if he puts a garage up there, then he has to get the variance, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. He
Yeah.
can put a cement pad there.
And he can put-
park his fifth wheel there legally.
Which
There's
is
no
big as a
problem.
garage.
Right here.
But as soon as he puts the structure, no, on the garage side.
Right here, yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
But as soon as he puts the garage up, then he's got to get the variance.
He
So
he
we
would not
kinda-
be able to put it there again, because there wouldn't be enough room left. You
Yeah,
have to
we
leave
kind
12
of
feet
created a
from the property
double-edged
line.
sword there where they can park there, but they can't put a garage there.
But he currently has a parking spot over here
Yeah.
for the fifth wheel that's legal to the ordinance now, so.
Yeah, it's one of those where we got a double front yard. He's got it. It's used as a side yard, which normally would have a 9-foot setback, but it's got a 25-foot setback because it's legally a front yard because you're on a corner. We run into those corners. Those corner lots look big, but when you see the setbacks, they're not actually quite as usable as they look as you drive by.
And our neighbor to the north, on 1200 Crestview just did that last fall or last summer, put the third stall on. Kind of to give you an idea, we'd be a little bit further back from the road than they ended up. but that's kind of where we would kind of be at on depth-wise.
As proposed, they'd be 13.5 feet from the property line and 23.9 from the curb, so.
So they'd be 13 from the property line, still 29 feet from the curb
23.9.
because of that big
24.
because of the big
Yep.
right of way. Access, are you the access to that, is it gonna come off 12th or is it gonna come off Crestview?
We would look at doing it off Crestview, but not really using it as a garage where we'd be coming in and out. So it wouldn't necessarily have cars parked in front of it or anything like that, would be our intent or our intended use. I believe my wife has checked with engineering and we have enough for a curb cutout.
I believe so. Yeah, on a corner you normally do.
And we have been contacted by one of the adjacent neighbors that, I believe it's this one right here, that they are not in support of the request, so.
Okay. Is there anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the request? Approach the mic and say your name if you could.
I'm Robin Russo. I live directly to the south of Mike Mills at 1184 Crestview Drive. So I'm probably the most impacted of any of the neighbors in the area there. And I'm adamantly opposed to this proposition here. He's talking about a garage that is about roughly 2,000 square feet, approximately 40 foot wide, 54 feet long, that will come back within 9 feet of our property line, which I understand is within code. But I do have a serious concern about him going to the west there and encroaching on the lot line there. The traffic on Crestview Drive, they're not gonna be able to see anybody coming westbound on 12th Avenue there. And I see people all the time that go through that intersection entirely too fast. Personally, I think it's a miracle we haven't had a major wreck there. But if he constructs this garage as he's talking there, you're gonna be practically blind, coming north, approaching 12th Avenue there.
Ken,
Plus-
from that shadow, we see the shadow of the house there on that side of Mill's house. Can you measure the distance of that shadow? How far is that shadow from the lot line?
Well, that shadow is real close to how it would look.
So really, if we look at the shadow there, that's about where that garage will come out to.
Correct.
And then it will come all the way back toward Mr. Russo's house.
He's gonna be
9
way-
feet from the lot line
He's
there.
gonna be way out of line with the rest of the houses along Crestview Drive there. And it's gonna be ugly, there's no simple way to say that. It's not gonna look good. Crestview Drive, used to be a very, very pretty neighborhood. And this is certainly not gonna do anything to beautify the property there. Plus, I have a suspicion, that the size of this structure, smacks of commercialism. I know he's talking about do-it-yourself projects, but I have a suspicion he's got other things in mind here.
How tall are the sidewalls, Kenny?
I do see that it looks awful tall.
This one's 13 foot. Or if that's totally objectionable, you could do it that way too.
Say that again?
I said if the 13 foot is totally objectionable, you could do it this way too.
I understand Mr. Rosso's concerns if you come around the corner, if that garage is that much taller than the house, it does look like a garage with a house attached to it instead of a house with a garage attached to it.
The house can't be much more than 1,000 foot, 1,100 feet.
And
And we're talking a 2,000 foot garage, so come on.
And we do see times where there's, the garages can be made, we see it in a lot of places where garages look like home windows and things like that. You can't tell if it's a side of a garage or it's a side of a house. Do we have any other shots of the back or the sides as to where the windows are in that new garage? Does it look garage-like or does it look more house-like? We see that up on up in the Hofteaser edition where they're not allowed to have detached buildings, so they have larger garages, but they're built out to look like a bedrooms from the outside looking in. Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the permit? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I'll make a motion that the garage to be the same level as the house.
With the footprint that he's asking for, with the setbacks?
Correct.
Okay, motion by Mr. McGuire to approve the permit as far as the footprint goes, but the sidewalls need to match the house.
I'll second it.
I have a second by Mr. Stonebarger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries as stated. Any old business, Ken? Can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Stein. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Okay, Jeff, you ready?
Yep.
All right, I'd like to call the Thursday, February 4th, 2016 Watertown City Plan Commission. Roll call, please.
Stein.
Here.
Stonebarger.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Dolly. Here. Hanson.
Here.
Arnold.
Here.
Council Liaison Albertson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion in a second?
I move.
Motion by Mr. Arnold. Second by Mr. Stonebarger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 7th, 2016. Can I need a motion in a second? Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda is the South Broadway vacation.
Great. The petitioners, Glacial Lakes Energy is the owner of these three properties that are adjacent to, or all the properties that are adjacent to it. And some background on this, the petitioner is requesting that South Broadway Street be vacated from the southern edge of HESCO, which is right here, to the north edge of the southern bypass. So all this area highlighted in black right there. And the reason the petitioner is requesting this vacation is because they would like to construct a railroad loop track on this stretch of Broadway. And then some facts about this stretch of road. It's approximately 2,500 feet long. It currently has one railroad crossing right here and one bridge right here. Also, there's been 4 traffic counts that have been done, one in 2005, one in 2011, 2012, and 2015. And those counts show that, well, I'll read them. In 2005, there was 1,994 vehicles per day. In 2011, there was 2,033 vehicles per day. In 2012, there was 1,988 vehicles today. And then in 2015, there was only 1,139 vehicles per day. And that was a result of the southern bypass being constructed in 2012. So the counts show that after the southern bypass was built, the traffic counts along South Broadway have reduced almost in half, about 60%. Also, we contacted the municipal utilities, and I have an email here from Mark Meyer that summarized states that they're okay with the vacation, but they would like the right-of-way to remain as an easement, as they do have utilities, they have a water main, and overhead electric along there. And the email also says that they had a meeting with the ethanol personnel, and they don't believe that the easement would interfere with their plans. So sounds like as long as it was an easement, they were okay with it. And then with that, I'll answer any more questions you may have for me, or.
Thanks, Jeff. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the vacation. The one thing I want to make clear is this board's job is not as to whether or not it's something's good for a business or bad for a business, profitable or unprofitable. It's more about zoning and usage of the land as to what it's for. So when we look at a vacation, we normally look at what's the purpose of that road, is it serving its purpose, what's happened in recent years as to whether it continues to serve that purpose, and in a sense, it's probably not the right verbiage, but is it excess? Does the city still need to carry that on its burden itself with that as far as the use and maintenance of that road? You know, and that's what we have to think of today to look and go. I know the ethanol plant would like this to expand and develop, but we're looking more on a broader side to say we have a bypass on one side. And what are we doing with the highway? It's more of moving traffic. Is this still the collector street that it used to be, or are we trying to move traffic in other spots?
And I also want to add that on this particular motion, you guys are just making a recommendation to the council, and they'll ultimately be the ones that have to decide.
Correct. The council looks to us as to basically do the heavy lifting as to whether or not we think it's something that the city still is useful for the city and something that holds its weight for what we put in it in time and money. But with that, the public hearing's open if anyone wants to speak on behalf of it.
Please state for the record.
Jim Sire, CEO at Glacial Lakes Energy. I have a PowerPoint presentation here I'd like to show. Is that acceptable?
That'll be good.
Okay.
Quickly.
Time do I have?
Sometimes we say yes and we're here for like 45 minutes. Next thing you know, you're showing us the vacation and I'm like family vacation.
If you click on that X, click on that one right. Yeah, that'll blow it up.
The one thing, Jim, I would be interested in as you go through, if you can point out, is I was on the board years back when we first started, and it was said that there won't be a train crossing at peak times like noon and 5, but I don't think there's as much control with that as we'd hope there was, because there are train crossings 212 at noon and 5, and how this would, my interest was how is this going to impact the traffic on 212?
Yes,
Hopefully in
and
a
I
less.
think we've got a couple of slides here that will illustrate that, and we can even narrow it down. Of course, we're basing the information on our MINA facility, so it's always going to be different with these unit trains, but I think you'll be interested to see what we have as far as statistics from MINA. So
Let's start with unit train. What's a unit train?
A unit train is a 96-car unit, and the difference between a unit train and a single-car manifest is what we call our single-car shippers, our Watertown plant. The cars that leave here, they go to Wilmer, and some of them might be bound for Denver, some might be bound for Seattle, Tacoma, some might be bound for Albuquerque and other points. They all get separated at some point, maybe in Wilmer, somewhere else, and then they get shipped. They sit there and then they get shipped at the appropriate time. A unit train will start in Watertown and will continue on its path until it reaches its destination, in many cases without stopping or with minimal stoppage. What they do is they leave the 96-car trains intact, And a common shipping point for us is going to be Houston or Dallas or LA. And it'll be the larger areas in most cases, or a port. And they'll leave that train intact. They'll unload it quicker. It turns around, it comes right back. And en route, they'll switch out the crews rather than break up the train. And so, of course, the time that it takes to get there is about half what we see here in Watertown with a single car shipper.
Your trains that you have today, how many cars are those normally?
Oh, you know, we make about 80 cars of product a week here, so, you know, it can vary based on what comes and goes, but we get service twice a week. You know, 40 to 50 cars is typically what comes and goes 2 times a week.
So the new trains will be twice as big as the existing ones?
The
you
new
have,
trains
roughly?
would be twice as long, yes. Again, we're not really changing the volume that we're shipping. It's just we're changing how we ship it. Okay, we'll work through this fairly quickly. Okay, the role of transportation in our business is important. The ethanol industry is high volume, low margin. We're a price taker. We cannot store product out there. We've got storage tanks, but typically we have 5 days of production storage. We got to get it out of here. There is no opportunity for us to sit there and build up storage and continue to produce without shipping this product out of here. So that explains why we need two services per week with our current situation. Transportation efficiency is critical, and the Burlington Northern Railway realizes this and works hard to develop these efficiencies throughout its system. Here's a statement of support for this project from John Miller, who's the VP of the Ag Products Group, to Mayor Thorson. These are actual quotes from that letter. The efficiencies of unit train operations can strengthen competitiveness. As we mentioned, shipment times can be cut in half. In today's competitive economy, market access is enhanced by unit train capability because many customer destinations call for this capacity, especially export markets. Okay, so that's what we're trying to reach here from Watertown, is some of the more developing export markets. BNSF unit train destinations for domestic blending capture rate and shipping efficiencies, and unit destinations buy exclusively in units. It's hard to ship a single car into LA, Dallas, Fort Worth, or Houston this day and age because they've converted themselves, and the railroads have converted themselves to unit train destinations. Here's kind of a slide that you had a little bit of aberration in 2011, but it really shows the upward trend of what we see in the ethanol exporting arena. You can see that it continues to be a bigger part of our industry's business, and Watertown is being left out of this this graphic. So putting it simply, it's all about efficiency and market access. And we believe everybody comes away with wins from this project. Certainly the BNSF wins, and I think rail service is important to Watertown. I think Glacial Lakes Energy is very important to rail service in Watertown. We probably, I don't know the exact number, but I would say we're close to 95% of the shipping volume that leaves Watertown, South Dakota. And without that volume, they would need to look at their either the shipping rates would be much higher, or they would to maintain that line all the way through here might be a major question mark for them. Certainly we're a winner, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. We think the city is a winner, and I touched on this a little bit, but here are some of the things that we think the city would benefit from. The general public, this is something that, you asked Mr. Chairman about this earlier, and so we want to go into this a little bit more, but we certainly think the general public will come out on top on this project. And here's what Mr. Miller had to say about that. This project can potentially aid in reducing overall grade crossing times over the course of a day because unit train service may result in fewer trains. less
That was
overall-
one of the questions I had. Do you feel by using this that those trains that are crossing the tracks at noon and 5 won't happen?
Well, I won't guarantee that they won't happen, but let me get through the next couple of slides and let's revisit that issue. Less overall train time at grade crossings can benefit commuters and other surface street traffic. And here's a schematic of the design. If you look, and I'll use this pointer here. Here's 212 right up here. This is the bypass or the connector. There's Broadway. And then you can faintly see the loop that we've talked about and that we would like to build. So let's talk a little bit about these crossings. The current situation is, as I mentioned, we're a single car facility. We get service twice per week. And we just called the local train master who was on his way into town today, and we asked him the question, when you bring service in on a Tuesday or a Friday, how many times do you cross 212? He said 4 to 5. So that's 4 to 5 every time they come to town, or 8 to 10 per week. Well, if you take that over a month's course, you've got 30 to 40 crossing events on 212. And basically what happens is, and we've all been there, you're sitting in 212 at the crossing, and the train is headed north, and you're almost thinking that, okay, this thing's going to clear here in another 30 seconds, and it stops, and it backs up. Well, that's the staging that they need to do to get prepared as a single car shipper.
And so what you're saying on that slide is right now we have 4 to 5 crossing events. You would have 4 to 5 crossing events a week. We're down from 30 to 40 crossing events per week.
No, what I'm saying is there are 4 to 5 once on Tuesday, there are 4 to 5 on Friday. If you take that over a month's period,
30 to
that's
40.
30 to 40 over that month.
What will it be with the unit train?
Okay, so the unit train, the loops are capable of holding an entire train. Trains pull in with minimal interruptions. That's part of the concept. And they leave with minimal interruptions. They hook and go. They hook up in our loop. They'll take off. And if we're sitting there, we're going to sit there for 96 cars, but they'll keep moving. They won't do this jockeying back and forth. Once they're gone, they're gone. So they're based on what we see in Mina. There will be approximately 12 crossing events per month.
From 30.
Some of these events will occur during non-peak hours. We took a look, excuse me, we took a look just this afternoon at what happened in 2015 in Mina. And we found that we actually had 80 departures and arrivals. And just a little more than half of those, or 45, were between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., 44% or 35 crossings during the middle of the night. And it's interesting because these things come, and I've got the actual times. They come in at all times, they leave at all times. They'll come in at 1 in the morning. So, and these are only our ethanol unit trains. Our DDG units would look very similar to this. There's no distinction between times for an ethanol train and a DDG unit. So I hope I've answered your question. We've gone from 30 to 40 per month down to 12.
So about a decrease of 2/3 of the
Correct.
crossing interruptions.
Correct.
So if I'm understanding you, Jim, the reduction in the train traffic across Highway 212 is because of the elimination of the staging thing you're talking about. The train will still cross 212 as it arrives, still cross 212 as it leaves, but the staging that you're talking about, that would be eliminated by virtue of the loop. Is that?
It would, yes. The other thing that we know to be true is right now the service is usually during the week. Some of these unit trains do arrive, and I'm not sure if they depart. They depart on Saturday. I'm not sure if they depart on Sunday, but you will get some weekend mixture in there too. So, it's much more random. It's not this, well, I'm late for work, or I'm going to run here at noon hour, here's the train sitting there. You could get caught by one at noon hour, but it's much less frequent. Okay, so as part of this project, we've become aware of really a number of issues, and we hope to kind of inform the committee of what we're doing to address these issues. Potential issue number one, we're working with affected businesses. We've reached out to Little River City. We're trying to develop a diversification and promotion plan with them. They currently do not have what we call blender pumps. We would love that there's a program out there in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We would love for them to take advantage of that program, and that way we could use that location as a means to promote, hey, they have blender pumps, they have higher blends of ethanol, go visit Little River City. And we've got that with a number of folks in town that have blender pumps, so we would make that available to them. We were made aware of HESCO egress, a situation in case of emergency. I've been working with Jeff Heinrich on that, and I think we've resolved that. Around the perimeter of these tracks, and there's going to be one large loop, 4 tracks on that loop, there's a 13-foot wide access road or service road. In the case of high water or some issue that developed, we would, in emergency, we would give HESCO access to that road either via the lock gate or a remote control or something, so he and his business could continue at least on a temporary basis. And you know, I met with him this past week, and he seems amenable to that solution. I do have an email of support from Dakota Bodies back in I think the first time we came before City Council. And essentially, Mr. Orthouse of Dakota Bodies said, you know, if it helps you out, we're all for it. We've got a great relationship with Dakota Bodies. We're neighbors. We work together when we can on certain things. Potential issue number 2 is working to address flood concerns. Excuse me. We're working on a zero rise designation, and in our eyes, that's what it needs to be. It needs to be zero rise or better. It can't be more restrictive than what we have now. We do have a waterway through the middle, designed as it is right now. We have a waterway through the middle of the property, which follows the lowest elevations. And there's box culverts under each of the tracks. I'll show you that here in a minute. And we have FEMA approval as pending. Potential issue number 3, we're working to address bridge concerns. We have a lower cost option in front of the city engineer's office and the mayor's office, other than the $1.6 million complete replacement. We again had been working with Austin Engineering on that. They are the ones that had weight limited the bridge, and so we do have an option in front of the city engineer. This option would eliminate weight limits and allow HESCO to have unlimited service across that bridge. Potential issue number 4, we're working to minimize environmental impact. I do plan a visit with the NRCS. I haven't been up there yet. I haven't been up there for a while, but I guess the last time I was up there when we first started this process, I wanted to understand wetlands a little bit, and I quickly found out we'd be going through wetlands. The plan has wetland mitigation built into it. I've sent a message to the mayor's office. A couple of weeks ago, I had heard that the city was interested in establishing a wetland bank. So we're exploring some possibilities of that on this property. Really, there's some tilled ground back there in that loop. I don't know that we have any interest in trying to lease that out. We would like to minimize the activity inside that loop as much as possible. Seeing that some of the CRP rates that I saw in the paper this week, we might be better off to convert that entire inside there to CRP or wetlands and leave it as that. So those are the 4 issues that we're aware of at this point, and we're working on all 4 of those proactively.
Thank you, Jim. I got some questions for you, Shane. And the public hearing is still open if anyone else would like to come up and speak with it. Shane, when it comes to, Jeff, yeah, there you go, Jeff. Can you kind of show us, I'd like to tackle the flood side of it once from the city side as to what control facilities are in there now and what's gonna be there when they're finished. Biggest concern would be, we're not gonna bottle anything down to inhibit the water from moving through that area as it has in the past?
That's what their plan is to do. They've designed, or their engineer has designed a path for the water inside the track, so it allows water to continue to pass through over the whole interior portion of that if need be. In other words, once the water's in there, it can flow out as wide as it ever did before the rails.
In your office, your office up there will work with them to make sure, won't approve anything if it's going to inhibit the flow
Well,
of that
actually,
water.
right now it's before FEMA for approval, and we've been reviewing the data and stuff that's been brought to us, and we don't have any concerns right at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Shane, what's the timeline on that? You know, the bridge you were talking about, that it can be HESCO appropriate and not truck limit appropriate. What would the timeline be to get that? So, because that is a major factor for HESCO, that because initially they said they couldn't use that bridge because of the weight limit. So what would the timeline be there, certainly before Jim would get started on this?
Well, we don't have a exact timeline identified yet, but first thing that has to happen is, out of these public hearings that we're having right now, is if we're going to go forward with a vacation or something, then that changes the level of need for that bridge that operates near HESCO. Right now, that bridge is rated at a lower level of service than a full legal truck. So right now, HESCO is operating by utilizing the route to the south and getting on the bypass. So if we proceed with this project, we'll have to identify the level of service that the bridge would be reconstructed at on the north end. And that's certainly not going to be something that happens in a matter of a month or something like that. It's still going to take some time. There hasn't even been anything other than a preliminary engineering evaluation as far as what the potential levels of service are, what the estimated costs are. So we haven't really even initiated that until after this hearing. But it's certainly doable in the 2016 construction season.
Let me finish up. Let's see, do you have the other slides?
Your slides are this one.
Okay. Just a couple of comments. This is the waterway, if you can see that. There are 3 large box culverts under the tracks here and here. And so the waterway does make its way through the middle of the property. This is the floodway line. So you can see nicely that, water in a high water event, and I'm not an engineer, but I would presume it'll make its way through down the river as it did before, and then also come through here. And so we're designing this with that in mind. So project impact, our project timeline right here. This is our goals. I know they're aggressive, but we want to try to get this thing into use at least by the end of next year. In compliance with the chairman's request, we'll kind of skip over these slides, but it's really all about efficiency for us and competitiveness. And certainly, I'll leave this slide up there if there's any other questions.
Thank you. Shane, I have some questions for the engineering department. This road is basically, I guess we'd be saying to vacate it. We're considering it being obsolete since we've come with the bypass that goes to the north. From the city's standpoint, when we look at that, the city's required to maintain that road. We've got the other bypasses. What's the engineering's thoughts on that?
Well, it certainly functions. Obviously, it's taking about 1,100 vehicles a day across it. So it can maintain that level of service. As far as overall service versus expense, I mean, this is a fairly expensive segment of road in our system because it does have a bridge on the north end and it has a box culvert bridge on the south end, both which have been are in our short-term planning to be replaced if the road is gonna be maintained. There's gonna be a new bridge at the north end, and if we design it for the level of service that we currently have, that's a $1.6 million repair, and, you know, we have probably a $500,000 repair on the box culvert at the south end. So, and really all this segment does is allows people to travel across this land. There's no businesses on either side of it other than Glacial Lakes and Hesco.
So I'll make a statement and say, if we put our plan commission hats on, our planning and zoning hats, we as a zoning board and a planning board, we design the arterial streets, the collector streets to move traffic. Since we've got the bypass built and with the new construction and the development that's gonna happen on 212, this is basically considered a shortcut.
That's correct.
You know, because
There
what
are
we really
alternate
have is we've
routes.
got a bypass, we're gonna have a roundabout in there. We've
Yep.
done a lot of things to move traffic safely and quickly through town, but this is kind of an old shortcut that
Right.
after we, in retrospect, we look back and say, now with all the new development, this is kind of the shortcut.
That's correct.
So we have to decide as a board whether it's something that we want to continue to maintain as a shortcut. But the one thing I do want to make sure is that we're not adversely affecting any businesses, specifically Hesco, to make sure that if we vacate the property, that we don't abandon Hesco in that bridge, because their only access in is the north bridge.
Correct, and we engaged Hesco specifically with that goal in mind, because we knew that whatever decisions were made with regard to this project were gonna have a significant impact on how they approach their business.
And when I looked at it, I talked to some other board members that, you know, you look and go, if you're coming from the south going to that, you make a left or right onto the bypass to get out to Walmart or to get out to West Watertown. The only time you really use Broadway is to get to the uptown area, which with the new roundabout is going to run you down 81 into the uptown area on 81.
Shane, what about the intersection 212 and Broadway? I assume, I can't answer for sure, but most of their heavy traffic probably has gone south for quite a few years. And now with that new bypass, it's probably all gone south. But now we're gonna force it all north. And that's kind of a sharp intersection there. Are those trucks gonna be able to make that corner? Have you looked at that intersection?
The intersection at 212?
212 and Broadway?
And he's saying, you know, those Hesco trucks, because Hesco will be
Hesco
the
trucks
primary.
coming
The
in.
Hesco
Right.
trucks now that are coming from the south, we're now forcing back on to
We're
Highway
gonna
212.
force
Correct.
those trucks back on 212.
Yeah, and I've been looking at that with DOT, because that's the first segment of 212 they're gonna reconfigure, or, you know, here in the next 3-4 years. And we've talked about that too, and we're gonna maintain the turning radiuses for a full-length truck so that we don't bottleneck that. And of course, the traffic counts going south and coming out of there from the north will be greatly reduced, so there'll be less conflicts with other vehicles in that intersection from the south as well, so.
Do you have any idea how much additional heavy traffic from Hesco will be going on at 212?
I don't know what their traffic count is coming in out of their facility. It's certainly, it must be a portion of the 1,100 vehicles, but I'm not sure what portion it is.
They have about 10 to 12 trucks a day.
Are those full-size 18-wheeler trucks, okay, semis? Okay.
Yes, and then they have their own employees coming and going, which, as near as I can tell, about 6 to 8 cars they're typically sitting there.
Okay.
So we'll go somewhere in the range from 1,100 vehicles a day to 30, 40 personal vehicles and 10 trucks as they come and go from lunch to supper to going home. Does anyone else have anything to say in the open while I have the public hearing open?
Yeah, I got a question for Shane. If we abandon this, there's a railroad crossing that we would also be abandoning, basically. Now, does that free up any railroad crossings north in town that we would not have to abandon, say, First Avenue North or whatever? Is that
This-
one of the 5 or whatever it is?
This
that
project
count?
does not impact that. It's actually the existing railroad you're talking about is part of Glacial Lake's operation now. It's private rail.
So it's not part of the,
The
No.
crossing is private
No.
rail, not
We-
public.
But because of the bypass project, a number of years ago, the city committed themselves to closing a crossing within the city limits because of the new one that was created by the bypass, and we're currently looking at a project to fulfill that agreement right now, so.
Excuse me, we tried, we really did, and we'll keep trying, but we kind of got a no on that one, because we wanted to swap this one for the one that needed to be closed downtown, and Burlington Northern said no.
And just so we're clear, the Cottington County Regional Rail Authority met a couple months ago with one of the items in front of it, and Mr. Jim sits on that board. He's one of the voting members of the Cottington County Regional Rail Authority. One of the items that was in front of them was consideration of whether or not they wanted to take ownership of the rail spur, because currently the city owns the rail spur, and it's there. It exists by virtue of a track access agreement that Burlington Northern has granted to the city of Watertown. The Cottington County Regional Rail Authority has legal authority to own rail spurs like that if they want to, but it was presented to the board, and they decided that they didn't need to or want to own it. They can still seek loan monies from the State Railroad Authority, so they didn't see any need to own it. So currently, the city of Watertown owns that rail spur. We are still the owner. That's your understanding, Rail Authority member, isn't it, Jim? Yes, the Rail Authority Board took no action on owning it.
And the rail spur is an asset to the city, I would assume. That's when it comes down the road 100 years and you want as many rail spurs that in your ownership as you can. Anyone else to speak in the open?
Yeah, I'm Rock McGilvery. I'm part owner in Little River City. As Jim said, they have discussed some of the potential things we could do, but we are seriously concerned with the traffic impact. I realized once the bypass was built, it went from 2,000 to 1,000 cars, but if you were that business in the corner, that 1,000 cars matters, or 1,100 and odd cars. There's plenty of business from Dakota Bodies, South Pelican residents, and I know it's minor, but you know how many people come from the south that access downtown through Broadway to get there. They'll be diverted, there's no doubt, and I realize that's minor, but I just wanted to state for the record, and as Jim said, they have been talking to us, but we are seriously concerned. So.
Thank you. Chip, I see you've got a microphone. You start bringing your own?
It's karaoke. Chip Primus, Watertown Fire Department. This development or track planning is not going to affect our response. And one bonus to this is they store a lot of tanks downtown, tank cars, and with this new round spur, they won't be storing those cars downtown anymore, and that's a bonus for public safety.
I'm Mike Davis. I want to weigh in on this just a little bit because I carried a petition to keep the police station downtown, to try to keep Watertown viable. And if we keep closing streets, I mean, I know we're going to close First Avenue because we sold that out to the railroad. And I don't know if these guys can split those unit trains so that they can keep that access open while they're waiting to move it out. I know nothing about that. The only thing I know is I just went to a charrette in November to try hold Watertown together downtown. And it seems like all we're doing is closing the streets to downtown. So if we're going to end up doing that, why don't we just button her up?
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else to speak in the public hearing? I have a question, Jim, to answer that. As far as, explain to us why it's not viable to leave that open while have your loop.
Well, we're kind of taking the marching orders from the Burlington Northern here, and they have indicated that they do not want the trains split of that like that. They would actually be split twice. And their concept, again, coming back to the efficiency aspect, their concept is hook up, charge up the air brakes, and go. And so when you start to introduce all these other types of what ifs, they start to drag their feet. You know, unfortunately, I wish there was another way. I wish we had a little more influence over the Burlington Northern, but we don't. And they are our only railroad, and we kind of do what they tell us to do. And I think both from a business and from a community, that might be the way it is.
Thank you. Anything else in the public? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. The one thing I want to make notes, since it's been a while since we started talking about it, the two things that probably need to be added with the motion is with the bridge reconstruction to accommodate HESCO and with an utility easement for municipal utilities. If we vacate that road, we're going to need a utility easement for the utilities has asked for an easement. So I'll ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve this with the utility easement and with the bridge reconstruction.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Arnold. You won by a hair. Any other discussion on it? Guys, any questions anyone has or as to?
I just have a,
Go ahead.
I have a question, and I'm not sure who it'd be for. Maybe it's more than a comment and a question, but I know it seems like, you know, you're really going out of the way to accommodate HESCO. And you heard the comments from Little River City here. It'd be nice if you could get in a little more dialogue with them and see if and what, if there's anything that we can do, because it will take, we all know it will take traffic away from the front of their business, so. I don't know how much you've gotten into that or how much more you intend to visit with them, but we're really accommodating one business, but not too much for the other one, other than blender pumps.
Yeah, I think a couple of things, and first of all, I guess I want to, just my own perception, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way. There are successful convenience stores in town that are not on a major intersection. And Little River City was in business prior to Dakota Bodies being there. So that aside, we are working with them, and we really, you know, I think we've bent over backwards trying to get them into this state program. We've come up with ideas internally. Do we have anything signed with them? No. Would we sign something with them? Yes, we would, to help make this something that's more substantial or of substance. You know, where we would maybe spell out some various promotions and various things that we would do to try to drive some of our shareholders, some of our general public that supports ethanol that direction, as we do with some of the other businesses that have the ethanol pumps. Absolutely, we'd be all in favor of that. Our goal is really to try to help them diversify, you know, to the extent possible. We'd give coupons to our employees. We'd do whatever we needed to do over an extended period of time to try to help out.
Thank you. You know, the one thing I have to say is it gets hard as a community and a planning board. You try to be progressive and you try to adapt, but it's always tough when you put a new stretch of road in somewhere and the driving habits change. There's many cases you don't think about those good old businesses that have been there forever, and now people are. But it's just kind of growing pains of a community when you do things and you invest money into public safety and speed of ease of use, and it's kind of the bad part of our job. Anything else in the discussion? I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Old business, Jeff? None? New business?
Mr. Lallam has some new business for you, and then after that, Luke Moeller with First District has a training presentation, but I'll let Luke go first.
One thing too, Tim, I had a note here that I'd like to bring these guys up to speed, but we're working with First District on a committee to take a look at the legal ramifications of the Supreme Court decision on our sign ordinance.
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay, I guess I'll let them kind of roll out of here first, but that. Go ahead, sorry.
Do you want to kind of go through, or do you want me to do that?
I
or-
can do it.
Okay.
There's been a Supreme Court decision in regard to signage as to whether or not you can govern the, I would say, content or the message of a sign. And in our ordinance, First District felt that we were governing the message of our signs by referring to them as on or off premises, and using different regulations for on and off are, in their opinion, illegal. So there's a committee that's put together. I'm on it. Tim's on it. A couple
Two
council members.
Two council members, yes.
are on it. They're just going to go through it, and then they'll go through that, make their recommendations of any changes, bring it to us. So we'll all see it, and then we'll get to flush it out and see what we want to do and what we don't want to do.
Okay.
We meet once a week. We're going to try to have it done by March, I believe. Wasn't that the date? That would be like 6 years faster than last time.
I think the first meeting was starting in March, and then as quickly as we can after that point. I guess the point of that is to maybe let everybody know that this is going to be, it's not going to be 4 weeks from now. We're not going to have a resolution to the moratorium that was put in place by City Council. I guess what I'm here for is we've had, this is a business located on Highway 20. I don't know how many of you people are, or how many members are aware of this business, but we had sent a letter, an initial letter to this business back in November, Jill? November, I think, and got zero response. So then we sent a certified letter in December, got zero response. And it was in regards to their signage on their property. As you can see, three banners on this side, multiple flags, things of that nature. And this here was our biggest reason for it was this unpermitted sign. That sign has since been pulled back to the rear of the property and is no longer out there. So we didn't get a response, but we got some compliance out of them. But the reason we're kind of here is these flags are in obviously very different states of disrepair. They have a lot of signage that's not technically legal. They're allowed one banner on the building and one freestanding banner on the property. They have multiple. They have 3 on that side, and I think there's a couple on this side you can't necessarily see in the pictures. And all the flags need to be, the flags are allowed, but they need to be kept in repair. So I guess really what we're here for is a recommendation or a buy-in, maybe is the correct word, of how aggressively we want to pursue these kind of things around town. This is an example, and there's maybe a few other ones. If anybody wants to point them out, they sure are welcome. But what do we do with something like this?
In my opinion, would be we enforce the ordinance. For every one person that's not applying by the ordinance, there's 90 that are.
Correct.
You know, and to me, to be in fairness to everyone, the ordinance is there, and what good is it if we don't enforce it? Your guys' thoughts?
Or is it the other way around, that 90% of the people aren't,
Well, he
adhering
said
to-
2.
What's that?
How many people aren't in compliance with the ordinance?
I don't know.
I look and go, if we put an ordinance together where 90% of the people aren't in compliance, we got to relook at our ordinance. But if we put if I was a business owner, and I am, and you drive down and somebody is not paying attention to the ordinance or just blew it off, it's not fair to those that are. There's businesses across the street, there's a sub shop and things like that. Should they do that?
Right, and to speak to your point, Pat, I think what you're getting at is I think this board would be all in favor of supporting enforcing these, but is this individual business being singled out as one of 2 or 3 or 4 violators, or is just this the worst case example, and that's why it's come up on the radar? But there's many businesses perhaps that aren't in compliance.
We have a little bit. Here's one of these. We call them feather banners, whether that's what they're called or not. I've had them referred to me by companies as such. They're gray.
I would say, at best in the ordinance presently on whether they're allowed or disallowed, right? Do you
Well,
count them as a banner? Do you count them as a flag? Do you count them as, what do you count them as?
I think we need to, they weren't really prevalent when that ordinance was made. And are they a banner? Are they a sign? Are they a flag? What are they doing? Are they just pretty, or do they have a message on them? If they have a message on them, they're a sign or a banner, right?
Or a flag, we do have a flag provision within there, is that, there,
What's the definition of a flag?
flag is in the definition of the flag. So, I don't know.
Well, I think those feather
You
things are
take
more in the
the-
banner family.
Go ahead, Mark.
Right, I would agree with you, but we've been hesitant, I would say, to go after these things because we don't really know what to do with them, I guess, is more, we're not, it's not that we're
Be a
intentionally
great
thing
thing for that committee to give us
Exactly.
a
We're
recommendation
not intentionally
on.
trying to ignore them, we just aren't for sure how to handle them, that's kind of why.
And the
we're
one
here.
thing we don't want to do is we don't want to inhibit business. We don't want business owners to make it hard to do business. We just want we want to find that happy medium between advertising and aesthetics.
Well,
Sometimes it's in the eye of the
that
beholder.
particular- That business isn't open now. So you have a building with signs on the side of it,
This one?
correct?
No, this one is.
Is it open now?
Yep.
It hasn't been continuously, but okay, go
Steel,
ahead.
the steel shop is, Ron Staw shop
So,
is.
no, I'm talking about the one across from the Senex. I thought that's what
Oh.
you were showing first.
Nope, these are all the same building, I'm sorry, these are just 3 different shots, 4 different shots.
That the old Powell?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Ron Saw, okay,
Yep.
I'm sorry. I was looking down the street a little bit.
Yep, yeah, this is where old Mark Hort's
So
building
that
is.
in essence is promoting his business.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just they're the flags, and that's a pretty easy thing for us just to say they have to be in repair. But the bigger question is, how many of these? And this is maybe more of a question for when we redo this ordinance: is how many of these kind of things do we want these things? How many of them do we want to allow? Those kind of things, specific language moving forward, and then in the meantime, how do we treat them or what do we do with them until that time that ordinance is revised?
I'd like to make a comment on your earlier question about should you pursue this or not. We do have an ordinance on the books that they worked very hard and long on. I think we should enforce that ordinance. If we're not going to enforce the ordinance, there's no sense having one. But there's a lot of businesses out there that are in compliance, and we owe it to those businesses to bring everyone into compliance.
Anything else?
And then that, just know that these are things you guys will have to consider and look at as we're moving forward. And I think that's more of why we brought it to you today is to, here's an example of a business or a location that has a lot of different signage and is that what we want or how are we gonna treat those? So, okay.
All right.
All right, thank
Jeff.
you.
Number 5 under new business is Luke. Was he next?
Luke informed me that procedurally it'd probably be best if we close this meeting, do a motion to adjourn. He'll still do his presentation.
We
Since
might not be
training's
here if he
not,
doesn't.
Something that the Board of Adjustment acts on or anything, it'd be procedurally correct if you guys adjourned first.
Okay, thank you. I ask for motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed?